I'm Paulette Pearson, and I am a colored pencil artist.
Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and you're listening to AART, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. This is Season 2, Episode 23. My guest this week is the Arkansas native Paulette Pearson, a coloured pencil artist who captures whimsy and humour in her drawings. She creates work that she says reflects a unique blend of artistic skill and storytelling, and has an eye for detail that harmonises with originality, authenticity, and depth. Paulette was born in Big Bear, California in 1982, the oldest of 3 children, to Ben, an engineer and business property owner, and her mother Paulette, also an artist. She grew up on her family's ranch in Arkansas, and as a child, her New Orleans grandmother encouraged her artistic interests as she quietly amused herself, not knowing that one day she would become a professional artist. It was journalism and the law that would initially appeal as a career. Paulette earned her BA in English from Lyon College, her MA in journalism, and a JD, both from the University of Arkansas, before spending over a decade as a magazine editor, first in Arkansas and later in Texas, covering luxury interior design and architecture. Paulette met her husband Rich in law school, and after spending time in Washington, D.C., the couple moved to Dallas, Texas, where Paulette most recently served as the Texas editor for Luxe Interiors and Design magazine. But once commissions started to come in and stores picked up her work, she knew she could become the full-time artist she dreamt of being. So she decided to take the plunge and return to the art that she loved. Paulette recently held her first exhibition in Austin, Texas. By combining realism with imaginative elements, she says, "I invite the audience to embark on a journey of discovery where the boundaries between reality and imagination blur, and where every pencil stroke tells a story." Paulette, hi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. What a treat to be with you.
Well, we know what I'm going to start with because we were talking about music just now and your favorite band.
Yeah.
And I thought I have to ask you this when you come on the podcast because you love the Beatles.
I do.
They're on your playlist.
Yes.
So if you had to pick one favorite track, Paulette, which one would that be?
That's really tough. And all of my friends listening will probably be laughing because they're all well aware of my love of the Beatles. If I had to pick one track by the Beatles, it would probably be In My Life, which I love just because, I don't know, it really touches me, and it just kind of makes you a little bit melancholy about kind of the path you've taken and the people you've met along the way. And, it's just a really sweet song. It's really simple and just really lovely, and that it kind of makes you think about your life and, kind of the path you've taken and how it's kind of led to where you are in that moment. So for me, that, even though it's difficult, I'd probably pick In My Life.
Do you remember when you very first heard the Beatles?
I do. So I remember it very well. I was probably 13. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but it was when the Beatles anthology came out, and they did this 2 or 3 part series on TV, and I happened to watch it. And I don't know, I guess I'm like a lot of people, many people in the world, like their story, and then just this idea of this band coming onto the scene and America coming over from Liverpool, and just like how crazy it was. And, but then on top of that, just their music was so amazing, and kind of seeing how they evolved. And, I just literally became obsessed with them, and I really haven't gotten over it since then. So I've seen Paul McCartney with my friend Candace. Hi, Candace. She and I see him at every opportunity. I think it's been about 4 or 5 times now. And funny enough, I am just like one of those girls in 1964. I like lose my mind when I see him. I don't know what it is about the Beatles, but they are just my heart band, I guess you would say. I absolutely love them. So, I don't remember what year the anthology came out. I'd have to check, but it's probably been since, I was probably in the 8th grade, I think.
So safe to say that Paul was your favorite Beatle?
Yes, he was. He still is. But I think one of the really cool things about the Beatles too is that, I like Paul's stuff later on, but I really like how their differences kind of blended. And, Paul was a little bit sweeter, and then John was a little bit more, I guess, he's more of a tortured artist. And then, George brought in like that, Far East influence. And for me, like, I do love Paul and I love his music a lot, but them being together, I think, is what kind of created the magic. So he's my favorite, but I love them all together in terms of like the music they created.
Is this the music that plays in the car or when you go exercising? Does your husband, Rich, have to put up with this every time?
He has to put up with the Beatles quite a bit. He has to put up with me talking about them a lot. Most of my friends do. It's for a lot of the times I turn to the Beatles, like their music is just so vast and varied. It just depends. A lot of times if I'm having a rough day or if I need something or like reassurance, that sounds so crazy, but if I turn the Beatles on, it just seems like everything's right in the world. It has this really calming effect on me. I love jazz as well, like Ella Fitzgerald and Etta James. That's kind of what I keep on all the time. But the Beatles it's almost a more, I don't know, it's when I need something or when I need like, I don't want to say reassurance, but when I just need like feel like I have a friend, or they almost feel like old friends to me in a way. It's more when I like need something from my music rather than just passing, if that makes sense. That's usually when I like say, okay, I need to listen to the Beatles and recalibrate and, everything's going to be okay. So it's usually when I need them for something like that.
And of course, you were born in Big Bear, California in
I was
1982.
Yes.
So I'm thinking you would be more the kind of the Eagles, maybe the Beach Boys kind of girl.
Really, the only band that has ever really captured me is the Beatles. So I don't know what it is. I'm not entirely sure, what happened or why, but I just listened to them. And I think everybody has a band or like a musician that they really connect with, that, they really vibe with, that really kind of speaks to their soul. And for me, it's the Beatles. And I don't know if it has to do with when I was born or just when I found out about them or their story. I know that I love their music so much. And I love that it's so varied and that you can kind of pick and choose what mood you're in and what you want to listen to, whether it's like in my life. And that's why it's so hard to, pick what's your favorite song. Well, I mean, in my life, I love, but there's also Blackbird and then Let It Be, which I love. I love Yesterday. So I think I just love how brilliant it is and how I love the lyrics and I love how it's very hopeful and filled with love. But then I love how they experimented. So, I'm not sure, but if it has to do with when I was born or just, I don't know. It's their music really speaks to me, in a really profound way. So, I'm not sure what it has to do with other than I just really love them a lot.
Are you musical? Do you play and sing?
I wish. So I have a little sister, Diana, who is extremely musical. And she has a beautiful voice. I don't, I think my grandmother was a pianist. She was a concert pianist on my mom's side. She loved music. So I grew up with an appreciation for it. And I think with my personality, music is, it really soothes me and it affects me in a big way. But at the same time, I'm not musical. I do not play an instrument. I really wish that I did. All of my art, I express my art in a different way, through colored pencils. So it is a gift that I wish I had. But I definitely have an appreciation for it. Just growing up, I remember listening to my grandmother. She was an amazing pianist, and, I'd be down the hall, and then all of a sudden she'd begin playing, and we'd go and just sit and listen to her, and she would sing. And so music to me is extremely important. It is something I wish I could create myself, but it's not something that I can, unfortunately.
Well, if you haven't inherited the music so much, or being a musician, you have inherited the art. Your mother was an artist. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So my mom, who is also named Paulette, she is an incredible artist. And, some of my earliest memories are, of just, I was yay tall, just little. And she had this big drafting board, and she would spend a lot of time standing at her drafting board. And I just remember thinking it was so important. What is it that she's working on? And, I'd kind of tiptoe just high enough to kind of see what it was. And so I think in terms of just the kind of artist I became, one who uses colored pencils, it never really dawned on me that there was really any other type of artist to be, because I kind of grew up with a mom who used colored pencils very, very well. So that's kind of what got me started. And then my grandmother, the pianist grandmother, I think she kind of saw that I loved it, and that, I guess I had a talent for it. And so she would, every Christmas, she would buy a colored pencil set for me and kind of keep me stocked with all of these like tools that I need throughout the year to create art. So that's kind of what got me started with colored pencils. And on top of that, I really like this sort of sense of control and sort of, that colored pencils provide. I'm not a painter, and I think it's funny because I think it really matches my personality. Colored pencils do, just because it's very tedious, and you really have to take your time, and, it requires, I don't want to say it requires, but it gives you a sense of control that maybe other mediums don't. And that's one of the things that I really love about it. But, it's not something that I just grew up with a mom who was a colored pencil artist. So that's kind of what I became, just through watching her and not really knowing at the time that there was any other kind of artist to be.
Did that suit your personality then as a child, Paulette? Were you a very patient, quiet child who would be happy to sit in the corner sketching?
Exactly. That's exactly the kind of child I was, I spent a lot of time with my art supplies, dreaming up various scenes and kind of sketching them and drawing them. So yeah, that kind of describes me in a nutshell. And I'm still that way, just 35 years later. It's funny, how you don't really change that much as a person, even though you get older. You are still kind of the same as you were when you were, still developing, just in, I guess, a more mature form. So, I think I still love to kind of hole up in my office and kind of be by myself and kind of take forever, whatever it is I'm doing. And a lot of people might think it would be super stressful. But for me, spending an immense amount of time to perfect a piece of art, I really enjoy that. Sometimes I do wish I could execute a piece a little bit more quickly, but I have found that the pieces that I'm the most proud of are the ones where I just kind of embrace that about myself, and that sense of just taking my time with it and really, kind of, getting into the details and the nitty gritty. And, those are the pieces that I'm the most proud of. So that's just kind of my style.
And it's a quiet place too. I understand you don't play music or anything when you're in your studio. I
No, I can't. I what I do, what I do when I'm drawing a lot is I will turn on old movies. But they have to be movies that I have watched a million times. They don't distract me. So I guess it's sort of the same with my like love of the Beatles. When I listen to them, it really to me feels like I'm listening to friends, and then when I'm drawing, I'll turn on like I love, love, love Alfred Hitchcock movies. And I love Grace Kelly and I love Jimmy Stewart. I love Audrey Hepburn. And one of my favorite movies is Rear Window. And I will start that movie almost every single time I sit down at my desk, which is now I'm making myself sound like a crazy person, but I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Jimmy Stewart, it's an incredible movie. It's so brilliant. And I love just this feeling that I'm like in his apartment with him, and Grace Kelly comes to visit and they're trying to solve this mystery. But I've seen it so many times that it doesn't distract me. It just kind of like it's almost like black noise in the background, but at the same time, it's sort of entertaining. So for me, if I'm going to do anything when I'm drawing, it's watch an old movie, whether it's Rear Window or To Catch a Thief or one of those, really fantastic old movies, preferably Alfred Hitchcock. I love, love, love those. I love Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, all those typical kind of old classic movies.
Well, it's interesting that you chose those genres to be your background soundtrack while you're working, because your art has a very whimsical, mischievous nature to it. There's humor. And
yeah,
it wouldn't have surprised me if you'd have said you were watching or listening to, Charlie Chaplin in the background.
I love that you get that from my art. And a lot of times I think my art, it kind of, when people ask like, what kind of artist are you? And I'm like, I like to consider myself like a fine artist. I use colored pencil. I try to be as realistic as I can with my art. But I think like whenever I find myself becoming too serious, or if my subject matter is, I kind of revolt a little bit against like super serious subject matters for some reason. I just, a lot of times when I'm drawing, I want it kind of expresses how I'm feeling. I really I'm only just recently, in the past few months, become a full-time artist. I was an editor for a very long time at an interiors and architecture magazine. And so during COVID, I was working at the magazine as an editor but there wasn't a lot of, I had a lot of free time just because of the nature of the world. And a lot of my art, that's when I really started producing art, a lot more art. I would, just because we all had a lot of time. And I think what I'm trying to get at is, we all have these weird emotions about the world. It was like this sense of exasperation or, like what, and I think a lot of my pieces, it kind of, embrace these feelings that I was having. And that's kind of what I still try to do whenever I'm starting a piece. And I want it to be beautiful, and I want it to be, have a sense that it's, a piece of fine art. But at the same time, I don't ever want it to be too serious, or I like it to have some sense of personality, or I like it to capture a person feeling a certain way. I love to draw people. And I just like to kind of capture an emotion, a silly emotion, or I think that's just like what I like to observe in the world is people doing funny things or feeling certain ways, whether, it might be, and a lot of times it's something I'm feeling at that moment. And it's like, how can I express that through my art? So maybe there's a little bit of me in all these pieces, but you're totally right. I really personally, and I hope you do, and I hope everyone else does, I get a kick out of like putting a little bit of humor in these pieces that I call fine art. So
there really is a very playful side to Paulette Pearson.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes too much. So I think, but there definitely is definitely a playful side to me. And I think that's what's so great about art is, if whatever type of artist you are, whatever I think that it comes through and out of an artist, from the subject matter to like the medium, you know, I think that's what makes it so cool is that art, even though art really does kind of, it really is a true expression of the person who is creating it in every type of way. So, that's just kind of what's so beautiful about it. And I'm also like I am pretty introverted. So it's also a really great way to kind of like express your personality too. And I think a lot of artists would say that, you can say a lot through your art and express a lot that is a little bit more difficult to express when, maybe you're a little bit more introverted or don't really know how to share things or, express certain things. So your art kind of becomes a tool or a vessel to kind of like show what kind of person you are and kind of, what your personality is like. So I guess I'm playful, but I'm also very controlling. So, that's one of the reasons I like colored pencil too is, there's not a lot of guesswork and you have to be very exacting and, it's not like with watercolor, which terrifies me because you put the water down and you kind of you have some control, but at the same time, you have to let go of a little bit because you never know, I think, how the paint's going to react with the page or where it's going to go. And that just terrifies me. So I kind of like knowing a little bit more about, I like being able to control it a little bit more too. So, I think anyway, that's just kind of what's so beautiful about art is, you can kind of tailor it to, it is an expression of like who you are and kind of, what your personality is like.
How would your parents have described your personality then as a child? And now what you're doing, now you've become a full-time artist. Would they have any surprises of how your personality has evolved?
Golly, I mean, God, I wish I could ask them. I know that sometimes my mom she'll see a piece of my art and I think so probably and just recently she kind of has mentioned, just kind of how it's kind of quirky. And I think I've always been a little bit quirky and I've always been very observant. Like I love to watch people move through the world. And I get a kick out of people who move through the world a little bit differently. And I love that. I think that those differences are what make people beautiful. And, I think that's something else I try to capture in my art is just, that kind of sense. And so, my mom talks about how my art is a little bit quirky or, just a little bit odd or off or, and I think that's just the most amazing compliment because the last thing I want to be is like super, I don't want to be like, I don't want my art to feel, I don't know, super, I don't know even the word I'm looking for, but to answer your question, I think my parents probably aren't surprised at the type of artist I am, just kind of based on how I've always been, just kind of appreciating the quirky things about people or, the kind of the funnier things. That's kind of what I've always been drawn to. So no pun intended.
We often hear from artists, Paulette, how the art has affected them and how it's drawn out their personality. It's given them confidence and how important it is as a vehicle for them to express their emotions and their personalities. What do you think art has taught you and what have you learned about yourself through your art?
Golly, I mean, it's for me, it's almost like therapy. I think going back to like that sense of control that I love so much about it, it's almost, like when you're driving and before you know it, you've driven 15 miles and you can't remember those miles because you've been kind of sort of in this almost like dreamlike state. That's sort of what happens when I sit down, with a piece. And that's not to say that it comes easily because, art is almost like controlled chaos. Like you're always on the verge of a mistake or messing up or, thinking you might need to start over. But at the same time, for me, it's very therapeutic to sit down and try to tackle this subject matter and get the shading just right and try to do it justice and bring this person or whatever it is to life, in a way that feels, that feels like hopefully other people will love it, or, that's kind of up to my standards. I can't tell you how many pieces I've started and scrapped. I need to get better about embracing imperfections a little bit more. But to answer your question, it is a test of, it's very therapeutic. It kind of also teaches me about patience, because like I said before, or as I said, it's really just, I kind of lost my train of thought there. I'm just trying to, but it's, it really, it kind of forces you to, be very, I guess, patient and, I don't know, like, yeah, this is such a profound question. I think I'm overthinking it because I've thought so much about just what kind of an effect it has on me, but it's very relaxing. It's very, I like the fact that too, that when you're finished with the piece and, you have something to show for it, all that work you put into it, and you kind of have something to share that, you're proud of, that hopefully other people will appreciate too. So there's that sort of gratification of like using your hands, putting your heart and soul into something. And then later on, it's something that other people might resonate with other people too. So there's this kind of, that's a very scary thing, to create something and then to hope other people also like it, to kind of put yourself out there. So it teaches you what it has taught me and what it teaches me and how it benefits me is it's more, it's hard for me to put into words just how important art is for me. And going back to just when I was younger, I think about, I've taken all these twists and turns in my life and career, but it really is, I think people at a very early age, or at least in my case, like it's something I was drawn to very early on. And I think it's funny how it took me so long to kind of get back to this spot, and I think that it's a very lucky life if you find that thing that kind of lights your spirit and lights you up, and that you find it early on and you can kind of create a life around it. I feel lucky that I've been able to kind of come back to it just in the past, full time the past few months, but in the past 5 or so years, really getting back into my art. I feel very fortunate that this is something that I can wake up into every day. And then I can kind of make a career out of it, and that people, like appreciate it. I love it when people tell me that something really spoke to them. That makes me so happy to be able to create something that other people can enjoy as well.
Well, you were born in California, but you were raised in Arkansas on a farm. I'm wondering about the influences there that you've brought to your art and how that's colored your palette, so to speak.
I don't know. I mean, I was born in Big Bear, and I didn't live there long. And we moved back. My dad's dad had a farm, a ranch in North Central Arkansas, and it's where my parents still live. It's about 2,000 acres. And we moved back, and, I was, I think, like, to be honest with you, in the beginning, it kind of felt, a little bit isolating to be in it kind of felt like a far off place, especially back then, because we didn't have social media. I don't even think we had internet when we first moved there. And so for me, I always drew things that kind of like felt, I think just this notion of like this bigger world and bigger cities and like what I thought the rest of the world was like. So all of these, I think it shaped me in that, like, I kind of drew this life I imagined for myself later on. A lot of times what I'd like to draw now are things that, related to like going to museums and culture and that type of thing. I'm not sure how that affected, the type of art I do or my subjects, other than I just remember doing a lot of thinking about or like yearning for being, being around people and being like, I love New York. I still love New York City, and going and being able to observe and, so I think it kind of just fueled that kind of desire to like be amongst people. Not to say now, I love going back to the ranch, and I love the fact that, you can't get cell phone reception unless you're at the top of the hill. It's kind of changed a little bit because, I'm around people all the time, and I have had the luxury of, being able to see so many parts of the world, but it's nice to go home and kind of live that more simple life where, my parents wake up every day and watch the hummingbirds, and there's a little squirrel that comes and drinks water. And like, so it's a little bit different. And I think it's, right. There's always just this curiosity about what you're not experiencing in the moment, or an appreciation for something that you don't have in that moment. So, and that's an amazing question, because now that I'm saying all of this, I realize like, I think that being so isolated and in the middle of nowhere, it kind of made me fall in love with wanting to be in bigger places and see things. And, I think that's kind of what comes through in my art, but I do love going back now and being at home. And, just as I kind of think about some of the art I'd like to explore into the future, a lot of it is a little bit more nature, kind of geared towards, florals and nature, but maybe done in a modern way. So, you can't really help but be influenced in some way by the situation that you're in. So I think that's probably how it affected me.
Yes, I can see nature coming forth in your artwork, and also animals too. I know you have a dog, but are animals something that you enjoy drawing? Did you have a connection? Did you ride horses and do things that any other child would on a ranch?
Not really. I don't really draw animals. I love to do it. And the funny thing is I'm often asked, I have a dog and I adore her. Her name is Zoe. And she's the best. She's a little scruffy rescue dog that we adopted from the SPCA, and she's my life. But when it comes to animals, a lot of times people will ask me or commission me to draw their pets. So I do that on occasion. But it's not something I ever really did. I've drawn birds and things like that before. But, for me, I really love, flora, like flowers, and this sense of like, creating really beautiful patterns through petals. And, I mean, there's a couple of wallpaper companies that really inspire me. Gracie, and then there's DeGournay. They're hand painted wallpapers that oftentimes have these incredible, scenes, that are, floor to ceiling, just florals and very chinoiserie. And I love that. I'm really drawn to that look. So I've kind of been toying around with how to do that in a different way that maybe feels a little bit more modern. So I love being in nature, and I love, just all these incredible patterns that nature creates through, especially leaves. I'm always it's really drawn to leaves and, trees and, how the wind goes through the trees. And, my husband and I actually just planted a lot of landscaping in this home that we've sort of renovated and remodeled. So it's really got me thinking about how to do that in a way that feels kind of relevant and kind of tied into what I already do. So hopefully I can get to that pretty soon, but it's definitely been on my mind a lot lately.
Yes, I can see in your artwork how whimsical and funny it can be. I can almost sort of close my eyes and see those characters come off the page and become animated.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel that when you're creating these characters?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, I always love when they do finally start to emerge. I draw a lot of inspiration. I'll find inspiration online that kind of sparks the idea or gets me started. But it's always, and that's where earlier when you asked me and I kind of fumbled, you're like, how does art, how has it helped you, or what effect has it had on you? As I tend to be, at least sometimes, very impatient, which doesn't really mesh very well with my type of art, which is very tedious and takes a long time. And for me, at that moment, when I've been working and working and working, when I start a piece, you start very slowly and I'll shade the skin. And then when that person starts to emerge and it's almost like you're meeting your subject. And it's a very exciting moment for me. Like, it brings me so much joy to see like how it's coming alive. And, I love that moment. And it's, you have to be patient, but then when it's, she starts to emerge, in most cases, I'm looking up, I have a gallery wall in my studio of all of my pieces. And it's almost like they're friends, you're like meeting them for the first time and, they'll be around for a while. So it's like, hi, and then you can kind of finish it and then just hope that you don't make a mistake. And then of course, going back to your question, and then even if you do make a mistake, you have to be kind of okay with it because art is not perfect, so it teaches you so many things. But yes, as they kind of come to life and it almost feels like a friend that I'm meeting for the first time. And I'm really it's a very exciting moment after all the work and thought went into kind of creating it.
Would it be fair to say that it's very feminine?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's not like, it's not intentional.
Are you a girly girl?
I'm not a girly girl. I would not say I'm a girly girl. I think, I'm not a girly girl. But this is like forcing me to like really like do some self-reflection. I'm definitely not a girly girl. So I've said that 17 times. So I don't think that, but I think like when, my stuff feels feminine, but it also feels like, I think kind of emotional, and it feels, like I have one where, a girl is like, she's at breakfast or brunch or something and her face, she's got her face kind of like, she's slumped into like a stack of pancakes. And, I have another one, and a girl, she looks like she's pretty exasperated and she's like bending over and holding onto her knees. Like she's just tired of everything. So I feel like my art is feminine, but it also is just kind of like emotional. Like what I like to get across through it is just this sense of like someone who's feeling something. Like, I'm not like an artist who's going to do a lot of like pretty pink polka dots and florals and like sweets. But it tends to be, I think, people I can relate to, and that's, I guess women. And then all these different emotions that you can have. I have a piece that I did, and, she's looking at this, like, coming out of COVID, I did one of someone, and she's like, kissing a statue, which people love. And for me, like what that represents is just this sense of like coming out of the pandemic and being reunited with culture, like I was just so ready to go back into museums and just feel like I was connected with the world. And so I guess they're girly in that a lot of times the subject matter is, feminine or a female or, doing something. But at the same time, that's not really my entire purpose. It's just a feeling that I'm trying to get across through it. And then I guess the subject matter or the way that I do that is through someone I can relate to. And a lot of times that's a woman, and she's doing something. And in my mind, it might be crazy, whatever it is that she's doing amidst, it has that emotion. So, there's like another one I've done. I titled it WFH, working from home. And she's like sitting in a chair and she clearly she has her jeans on, but they're like unbuttoned. And, so she's clearly at home by herself and she's got like a newspaper in front of her. So I don't know. It's just kind of the way that I feel about things or interpret things. And then it's like how I create these characters or draw these characters, to kind of represent that emotion. So that was a long answer to your question. But I would say ultimately, I don't think I'm a super girly girl. My art does often include feminine characters, but for me, it's more about like what they're doing and this like type of feeling I'm trying to use them to kind of communicate to whoever's looking at them. Yeah.
So now that we've painted a picture, so to speak, of you as an artist, I think our listeners might be slightly surprised to learn that you began by going to law school, and that changed, of course, but what was the catalyst for taking a legal profession?
When I was in college, I did English and, I've always loved to write and I've sort of an edit. And, I was finished with I graduated from college and I think, what I do have, obviously, if you love to write and edit, like that's something that an attorney does like frequently. It seemed like a natural progression. I thought it might be something I wanted to do, just as sort of a next step, but it was almost just like stepping into it, seeing if I would like it. I don't think I had this burning desire to be an attorney. I just really thought it might mesh well with some of my skills. I'm really glad I did because that's where I met my husband, Rich, who is an attorney now. But I think a lot of times attorneys have like an artistic side. I'm not sure. I meet attorneys all the time who do appreciate art, who might do art on the side. So I don't know if there's a connection there, but what happened, is when I went to law school, I ultimately decided to get a master's in journalism after that. And then I was an editor for a very long time. So I really wish, and, I think as an artist, this is something I've always loved to do. And I remember when I told my grandmother who bought me those colored pencils that I was going to go to law school, she was like so disappointed because she knew I loved to draw and she knew I loved art. And, for me at the time, it didn't even dawn on me that this thing I loved so much could be a career. And I remember that moment just like it was yesterday. And I remember thinking, why, I can't even imagine doing this as a career. And I really wish I had listened to her because I'm so glad that I went to law school and, everything happens for a reason. But at the same time, like I often wonder, like if I had just dove right in to this, to this career, this, kind of, into the world of art, if I had done that, like where would it have led me? It may not, things happen for a reason, but I often wonder what that would have been like. And I'm not saying that law school was a mistake because, people end up where they end up. And I truly believe like, things happen for a reason. But at the same time, I often think about my grandmother who was just like, why in the world are you going to law school when, I know you love art and she probably puffed my ego up a little bit and was always thought I was so good at it. And I think about that a lot. So I don't know, other than, a lot of times now when I talk to really young people who are kind of trying to figure out what they want to do, I always just encourage them to like really listen to what it is that they love. And, you can create a life around that. You don't have to go into these careers that you feel, and gosh, I mean, there's so many amazing attorneys and that is what they love. And that's great. I mean, but if what you love might be a little bit, if you're an artist or you love to do something that maybe isn't as expected, I think that ultimately people will be more successful because you'll always find a way to be successful if you love it. And if you love it, even if you aren't successful, at least you're doing something you love. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm often asked to like, well, what's with law school? And I think I just took this roundabout way of getting back to what I wanted to do, what I've always wanted to do, what I've always kind of loved. And that is to draw. And I'm really lucky that I'm in the position now that I can do it. I think in a way too, if you're an artist, it's nice to have all these experiences, to kind of draw from as well. So who knows, maybe that was the reason. Maybe that was the universe telling me that I needed to have all these experiences first before I took it on full time.
Well, it took you to different parts of the country too. You came over to the East Coast, to DC, spent some time here and spent some time in magazine editing. What were your biggest takeaways from your journalism career?
I mean, I am so grateful for, the opportunity to live, like you and I were talking a little bit earlier about, I know you live just outside of DC. I love that part of the country. And for someone, my dad says when I was born, I just immediately, my eyes were open and I was looking at everything. And I love to observe people, and I probably stare at people and don't even realize that I'm doing it. I love to be in big cities and to walk around. It's my favorite thing to do. Like we were actually in DC because my husband was getting an LLM at Georgetown. So we were there for a bit, and I would have all Sunday to myself because he'd be studying or whatever. And, I would literally put my earphones in and, I'd walk around all day. I'd get on the metro and I wouldn't really have a plan. And I would just, I just loved being around people and watching people and what they did. And I just get so much joy out of that. And that's something that I think you can kind of get out of my art is, because I think my art kind of captures these moments that it's like you're happening upon someone and they're doing something or something happened or they're feeling a certain way. And that's what I love about the world is just kind of like these little snippets of people's lives and you happen upon them. You'll probably never see them again, or you don't really know what happened, but you can kind of relate to how someone's feeling and that's what I love about DC, or like I said before, I love New York. I love just kind of walking around and seeing all different types of people doing things kind of out and about. And I think, I was at a magazine that we covered interiors and architecture, high-end interiors and architecture. And so, and my focus was on Texas in particular. And, it's really wonderful to be kind of immersed in that world of, creatives, and to be exposed to so much beauty and beautiful homes. And I think what I loved about that job the most was just, a sense of artistry that you can kind of bring to any aspect of your life, and in particular, like your home. And so, like I mentioned, Gracie wallpaper, DeGournay, like I always really love furnishings and materials and things that have, a kind of an art to them where you can kind of see that it was hand painted or handmade. Because there's all different types of artists out there creating amazing things. It may not be on paper. It may not be with colored pencil. It may be with watercolor, or maybe they're creating a beautiful chair, or wallpaper or fabric, or and it's a little bit overwhelming to be kind of surrounded by that all the time. But you also learn so much about kind of how things come to be and kind of scale, and that's definitely informed my art, because ultimately I want my pieces to hang in a home, and I want people to kind of incorporate them into their houses. So, I think that, design and art, it all is intertwined. And I really loved sort of that artistry and then not to mention architecture, I loved talking to architects, as an editor and interviewing them and featuring their work. And, it's really amazing what people working at a really high creative level can create. It's kind of awe-inspiring. So that kind of inspired me too, to say, I kind of turned the tables, and I featured artists even as an editor, and wrote about them, and all the while kind of secretly yearning like to be one of them. I'd rather, and so it's a little bit kind of it's a cool moment now to even be talking to you, and you're talking to me about asking me questions about my life as an artist when I did that for so long. And it's something that is really sort of like a pinch me moment, because this is, I think, what I was always meant to do, is be an artist, and to now to be able to talk about it and to kind of share, what it is I love about it, and what, and to talk about my process and my subject matter. It feels really great to finally be able to do that, because I did that for so long. I loved celebrating other artists, but I think selfishly, I always really kind of wish that I could be an artist who was being, it's like I've turned the tables up, a little bit. So, to be that kind of on the other end, I guess, of the question, to be the one being questioned about my art and career as an artist, it feels really good now to be able to do that. So I think I was inspired by all those artists and all those people to kind of like take that leap. And it feels really good to have done that, as scary as it might have been.
So you've really now embraced your identity as an artist and accepted that this is who you really are. You are a full-time professional artist. You're comfortable wearing that crown now.
It's so, I'm getting more comfortable. Like it's a scary thing. And, seeing all these amazing artists out there, so, I mean, to answer your question, I definitely feel like, I'm finally pursuing what it is. I always secretly had this like very, very like deep longing, what I always really wanted to do. To the point that I would almost ache sometimes, like, but I never quite like had the gumption to do it. And I finally did. And, I've been really lucky, just kind of to immediately have been, I feel I'm very lucky, because, my art has been accepted, very well accepted so far, and it's been received very well. And, I hope it continues, but, it's a little bit scary. And I am a little bit more like, I don't want to say shy, but I'm not as public, and I'm a little more introverted. And, so it's hard to put your stuff out there. And, so it's a little bit scary, but it also is it's also really rewarding, and it almost feels like I'm saying, this is who I really am. I'm not like, what I mean? Like it's almost like you're kind of like, is that okay? Like, like this is really what I want to do. And, so I've slowly kind of, I think, I've slowly started to really think of myself as like an artist, and I've had some conversations with other artists about even calling yourself one, because you feel like it's almost like you feel like you have to, there's got to be like an initiation to be able to call yourself an artist, or, and so it's a really funny thing. And now, like, to say, I'm an artist, if someone says, what do you do? I'm just like, I'm an artist. And, it's getting a little bit more natural, because I think I tiptoed around that for so long. And, I delved into other things for so long. And, to now like be embracing that side of myself in such a big kind of like way, it feels really, really good. And, it definitely feels like it's what I was meant to do. And I think I'm excited to kind of, see where it takes me and explore all these ideas I have kind of swirling around in my head, about what I can create and what will be well received by people and by people want to put on their walls. And, it feels like there's no limit to what I can do. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of what I have to contend with now is like, what steps do I take and how can I be intentional about it? And, what kind of, how do I evolve it in a way that still feels very, how do I evolve my work so that it still feels like me, but maybe, maybe feels evolved, if that makes sense. So I kind of want to dabble in new things. And, so really it is really fun, but you kind of have to say, okay, now I'm an artist and how am I going to, handle this? And what am I going to do with this new title? And, it almost feels like you have a responsibility. And, I think it's really fun to kind of be able to work those muscles in my brain and try to figure out, what I'm going to do with this because it's not really defined for me, and whereas in the past I've had jobs and, your job is defined. You have a job description and you're expected to do certain things. And every day is pretty much, you kind of have an understanding of what's expected for you. But now as an artist in my own studio, kind of making my own schedule, I'm trying to figure out like what it is what that looks like and what works best for me. So it's a really fun, a little bit terrifying kind of notion of being an artist, but I'm definitely getting used to it. Whether I like it or not, I'm an artist and I have to figure out kind of, what's next and how I want that to look for myself.
So you've banished that imposter syndrome then. That does not belong to you.
I hope so. I mean, you have moments because, there's definitely some artists I really look up to, and who really inspired me and really in a big way. And so it's, I would never venture to even, say I was even in their league, so but at the same time, yeah, I think if you're going to be a successful artist, you can't have that feeling that you're not good enough or that you're not, that you're an imposter. Like, because I think, if you do love it and you have something to say, like, you should be able to. And, if you're able to express it and you have some talent, it's, I think you can call yourself an artist, so, you have moments, but at the same time, like, I think it's important to keep those thoughts out of your mind. If, and just kind of say, okay, I don't think you can't really have that thought. It does help though when, I have had recently, I did my first art show at Brick Design Group down in Austin not too long ago and met some lovely artists who also participated in the show. And we were talking about this, and this is what I'm kind of thinking of as you're asking me this. And, one artist in particular, we were talking about even just calling ourselves artists. It kind of feels funny. And here we are, both of us kind of showing our work. And, I guess that's the definition of being an artist. And it's just funny how I think even seasoned artists sometimes maybe have trouble calling themselves that, maybe that's just the nature of being an artist, is maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just kind of the natural evolution of things if you're an artist.
Well, you talked about, having a profession would give you, a job description, but does having commissions give you a kind of a structure and the guardrails for your art on a daily basis, the discipline of commissions, or does it stifle you in some way?
Yes. I mean, obviously I'm so grateful for the commissions that I receive, and I have a few that I'm working on. And I think the thing that I love the most about commissions is like, it kind of forces you to like, to work on things that maybe you otherwise would not have, so it kind of forces you to work outside the box, maybe not think outside the box, because someone will come to me and say, I'd love for you to draw, my kids or, a lot of my pets and so, that's definitely different than some of the other, the subjects I usually draw, but it's also great practice. And I like that. I really love that gratification of like completing a piece and they love it. And, that's really wonderful. And you're right. It does create some kind of structure for me because I have to prioritize those commissions, and I'm so grateful to them. But, I think any artist will tell you, like, it's so nice, because I sit in bed at night and I think about all these collections I want to do and subjects I want to kind of explore. And it would be great to be able to just wake up and work on those things every single day. And, but, as an artist, I mean, it's nice to have commission and to get that, to get that interest in. So, I don't want to say it's stifling, but at the same time, it does give you that sense of like having an assignment that's due. So some days I do know I need to wake up and complete this commission that someone who has so kindly asked me to do. So it's not stifling. It's just maybe it feels a little bit distracting from these ideas that I have that I want to explore. But being an artist, a commission is I'm so flattered and always so blown away when someone messages me and sends me an email and says, "Hey, I'd love to learn a little bit more about getting you to work on a commission for me." And then to know that, they hang it in their home. Like, it means a whole lot. And it is nice when they can kind of let me have a little bit of freedom in that work though. So they may have a general idea and I can kind of insert a little bit of my style or a little bit of that whimsy. So it's sort of a blend, but it's not stifling, but sometimes you like to have the freedom of just waking up and saying, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do today." But, it just doesn't, as an artist, I'd rather be busy with commissions than just always working on things I want to do. So.
Well, finally, you mentioned to me that a couple of your favorite female artists are the American photographer Jamie Beck and then the Australian artist Bella McGoldrick. Yeah. What is it about their work that inspires you?
Jamie Beck especially, and I absolutely adore, I think what I like, so she is a photographer and she is originally from Texas, and then she lived in New York for a very long time and was a very successful artist. She created this thing called a cinematograph. And, I think I kind of began following her years and years ago. And I think the thing I love the most about her, so she moved to Provence. I guess it's been about 7 or 8 years ago now, just thinking she'd be there for a year, and she decided to stay. And, what she photographs it's almost, she stages these scenes that kind of celebrate her surroundings. So a lot of times it'll be flowers that she's found on a walk or grapes from a local vineyard. And I think what I love about Jamie is obviously she's incredibly talented, and her work, I really got into it during COVID, because it kind of fulfilled my need to like be in another far off place when I was stuck at home all the time. But what I also love about her is just this kind of like sense of like not having fear. Like, she strikes me as someone who follows her heart, and she's very bold about it. So she decided, she wanted to live in France and go to Provence, and she liked it enough and she decided to stay. And now she and her husband have a child there. And to me, that really inspired me. And in fact, my husband and I, we went to Provence last year in September. And it was so funny because I have been toying with this idea of going out on my own for so long and doing art. And it was agonizing. And on the way there on the plane, I listened to Jamie Beck's audio. She has an amazing book. And I listened to it on the plane to Provence, kind of getting ready for a Provençal adventure. Listen to her. So I'm listening to her voice the whole way there, just really looking forward to our trip. And when we got there, we landed in Paris, and we took the train down, and we were having lunch in Provence, in this amazing little town known for antiques. And I'm sitting there, and I look up, and Jamie walks out of the restaurant, And I looked at Rich. I was like, Rich, that is Jamie Beck. Cause I had just been listening to her like 2 days previous on the plane. Like I talk about her a lot because I really admire that she seems to be someone who follows her heart and just boldly calls herself an artist. And then I saw her and, finally she left and I think I'd get to see her, but then she came back for some reason and I like reached through the gate. I said, Jamie, I was like, oh my gosh, and I was just totally beside myself at the coincidence of that. And she was so kind and like took a photograph with me. And, I'm like, I literally couldn't even think straight. I was so excited to meet her. All that to say, like, I just kind of took that as this little sign from the universe that, I can be someone who follows my dreams too. It really was impactful to me. And I love her art and I love what she does, but I also love just how she kind of like, she just seems to go so boldly in an artistic direction and follow her heart in a really smart way. But to me, that was really impactful. And I've loved her for so long. And then to meet her kind of out in the wild in Provence. And after it was a big moment in my life because it made me really think about maybe this is something that I can do full time too. Like I don't have to be scared, we all we have one life, and if there's something that you really, really love, you might as well try it, try to make it work. And that's, I think, something I love so much about her. But then Bella, on the other hand, I've never met her or run into her or anything, but what I love about her work is that she's an artist, and you don't see a ton of really colored pencil artists. And I love how she travels around the world and she'll situate herself in a place, whether it's like Japan or, I think she spent some time like maybe in Costa Rica or, in France. And what she does is she'll take things that she comes across and then she photographs them and then creates art using those photographs as inspiration. And her work is so realistic and she's got this attention to detail that I strive for. So I like her kind of sense of observation and appreciating each place that she's in and like what stands out to her. And it's always like the things that are a little bit off, that most people wouldn't appreciate about that place. So, and, the things that are maybe a little bit overlooked, but really do define a place. Like, golly, I can't even think of an example, but it's that sense of observation and like kind of bringing it to life of hers that I love. So those are, definitely two artists. And Jamie is one. She's just lovely and I love her work. And, I just love that kind of message she puts out into the world of like following your heart and, kind of making it work and doing it sort of unapologetically.
Well, Jamie has agreed to come on the show, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that episode.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. That makes me so excited. I cannot wait to hear what she has to say. And you can tell her she has a huge fan in me over here back in Texas. So, that's so exciting. I'm so excited to hear that news.
Well, Paulette, it's been great fun hearing your story. I think we can actually caption this episode in my life.
Oh my God. Thank you. That's going to make me cry, actually. Like I have tears. You were just the most wonderful and most incredible interviewer in your power of perception. And you really did ask some questions that stumped me a little bit. And I feel like they really kind of forced me to like really dig deep and figure out why it is I'm doing what I'm doing. And, so I so appreciate your interest in my work. And I hope that my story resonates with some people out there and it's of some interest. So thank you also, lastly, for all the work that you do to sort of shine a light on artists and especially female artists out there working. It means a whole lot to us. So, or to me specifically. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for taking the time to come on the podcast, Paulette.
Thank you so much.
And you can view Paulette's art by scrolling down the show notes to the link right below there in your podcast app. And you'll also find a link to her social media as well as ours, where you can join us on Instagram at the AART Podcast and leave any comments, questions and suggestions for guests. As always, you know, we love to hear from you here on the show. My thanks again to my guest this week, Paulette Pearson, and to you for listening. I'll be back next week with another talented artist from around the world of visual arts, so I do hope you'll join me then.